today we just had a great conversation with Eric Henry from TS Designs. His website is tsdesigns.com. They do sustainable apparel and kind of doing some very interesting ways that they look at creating a sustainable brand around the apparel business. And we learned a lot today in terms of just that whole world, which I didn't know much about. And it was fascinating to hear him kind of tell us his story and how he got started with that. Learning he's definitely a true entrepreneur who has a lot of different projects that he's working on and a lot of passions. And I felt that, it was really valuable for me to hear a lot of what he had to say.
Yeah, totally second that, Jessica. Eric and I, as I mentioned to you, we met at the Charlotte Sustainable Economy panel through Sustain Charlotte and the Innovation Barn, which is a great community where the city is incubating sustainable businesses and startups. He and I were on a panel together for sustainable innovation and entrepreneurship, and I just thought that there were a lot of great insights there, and I definitely am walking away from this conversation having learned something. And listeners, we're excited to get your thoughts, and as always, reach out to us with who you'd like to see on the show next and what other topics you'd like us to cover and continue to grow this great community.
Again, I'm Eric Henry, president of TS Designs, based in Burlington, North Carolina. TS Designs has been around 48 years. I've been here 44 years. So I'm one of the old dudes on your radio show. And the way I got started, growing up, I did all kinds of, stuff to make bucks, mow grass, worked in a pizza shop. Then I went to NC State. And then I just saw there was an opportunity really to connect T-shirts to the college market, because the companies that were supplying the T-shirts were sitting outside and they didn't have the contacts. So I here on campus, very active, and I knew the people that were making those decisions. So I started a business, and went to school in 1976 and 1978. Boy, the world was a lot different in 1978. Computers, internet, even fax machines, cell phones, none of that stuff existed. So, but I built that to a large business, mainly focused on the college campuses in North and South Carolina. We had what we call college reps, and so we were very into those markets. Then I went over to UNC in 1980, and also during 1980, I met my business partner, Tom Sineath, and that's where TS Designs comes from. And so going into my senior year, going to be an econ major at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. Go Tar Heels. Well, didn't really make the decision my parents liked. I decided to go business career and not finish my college degree. So I was 18 hours short from being a economics major. And mainly at the time, I just decided, I enjoy what I was doing, making good money, being able to call my own shots, and seeing what other jobs my other fraternity brothers were getting. I says, well, I'm doing it just as well, and I'd rather be being called. So parents didn't like the decision, but I opted out. I keep saying I'm going to go back. I spent a lot of time on college campuses doing probably more good work than I was doing when I was a student. But anyway, so starting the journey, and we came what they call a large contract screen printer. So our clients were Tommy, Nike, Gap, Polo, Adidas. Moved in this facility here built this facility 35 years ago, something like that. And had about 120 employees. January 1, 1994, North American Free Trade Agreement was ratified. Within 2 years, those had to lay off over 100 employees because all those brands left. And this was a big textile community. So not only were we devastated, it really hurt our community, and some very large businesses scaled back, went bankrupt, went out of business or whatever. But we knew then, as we know now, there's more to a business than a bottom line. So we were an early adopter, what they call the triple bottom line: people, planet, and profit. And as we fast forward to today, I think that's more important than ever, because, businesses pretty much call the shots, especially in the time of government bureaucracy or government not doing anything per se. Gridlock, maybe that's a better word. So,
yeah,
I just, and that's now the opportunity to be on this planet for 66 years. And that's what keeps me going. My wife says, when are you going to retire? When are you going to do this stuff? I says, well, I'm enjoying what I'm doing. And hopefully, I was during that time where prior to NAFTA 94, 98% of our clothes were made here. I've got an envelope I love to show people on my desk. And on one side of it, the little Nike swoosh. Everybody knows what Nike swoosh is. I flip it over. And on the back side of that is an address in Charlotte, North Carolina. Prior to NAFTA, Nike's apparel headquarters was in Charlotte, North Carolina. We were one of three provider of Nike printed apparel. And a lot, and that was where it was pre-NAFTA. I mean, all the brands pretty much made here. Making overseas was a sign of really cheap crap. And so flip-flop, the brands are now so locked into making overseas, and we are realizing the problems. It's very similar to what's going on with climate change. We realize, well, there's something kind of, when you go outside of your market for product or service, and now everything, and we saw what happens to global supply chains during COVID. I think globally, the market's even less predictable as we see what's happening from a global perspective with all the issues in the world. But anyway,
right. The Baltimore Bridge can get struck and then go down, and suddenly, just like that, you lose an entire region being connected.
Oh, I mean, it's so you got the Panama Canal's gotten issues because of climate change. We know what's happened to Suez Canal because of the Middle East. You got the Ukrainian situation. China is going to jump on Taiwan any day, and that's just going to be a shit show. And again, as I like to say, I know we live in a global economy. We're not going to put that genie back in the bottle, but damn it, we can do a better job with our local resources. The nice thing about, or the great thing about North Carolina, I think this is the best place in the world, be the intersection, per the painting on my back wall, between agriculture and apparel. The only reason you go anywhere else is you're chasing price. And again, the brands are so infatuated, for lack of term, on the global marketplace to reduce cost. But then you end up with the places that you want to be at with, opaque supply chains that end up being sweatshops. And then now the newest issue, I just got off a conversation with a good friend of mine that was on CBS News yesterday in regards to a plastic report that he reported about all this single-use plastic. And it's just a joke. The industry wants to keep on pumping out plastic, and we got it in our clothes, we got it in our air, we got it in our water, we got it in our blood. And again, these issues have just blown out of proportion because at the end of the day, utilizing the global marketplace to benefit a few, and I like to say hurt a lot. So I kind of rambled off there, but anyway, we never decided, again, understand it's a global market, but for our perspective, we are focused mostly in North Carolina, although we do some work on the West Coast, but everything we do is domestic apparel manufacturing in a transparent supply chain around T-shirts.
So when you originally started before 1994, was that also the case, or did that shift when that happened to be more sustainable with the way you do business now, or has it always been the same?
Well, pre-94, we were domestic by default. I mean, the T-shirts we bought, the customers we had, the suppliers, it was all in the U.S. The only time you would buy T-shirts overseas, they were, just very poor quality, low prices, and very difficult. People that was kind of a turnoff if you tried to buy at that time. I remember their shirts were probably maybe $1 or something like that. But, which even in 1990, which was cheap, but everybody knew that nobody wanted that. I mean, the majority, or pretty much all the T-shirts at that time were made in the U.S. And so when it started making this shift globally, T-shirts definitely went along the way. And nowadays you can't find a T-shirt that's it's hard to find a t-shirt made in the USA. And then we started adding plastic to it to drive the price cheaper, which causes another problem. And then it's gone off the rails. But we knew then there's just something. Never forget, we were sitting in a conference or something, probably it's been 1992 or something like that we got invited to by the State Department. And it was all we were the little bitty company, but the big companies like Burlington Industries, which my dad used to work for, Guilford Mills, those were the two biggest textile and apparel companies in the world that were based here. And they were talking, go to Mexico, we're going to expand our market. And never forget, I mentioned something to my business partner, Tom, who's retired now, but very active in the business. That guy down in Mexico, and I forgot what they were getting paid a day, but they weren't getting paid enough to buy a $30 Nike t-shirt. So I said, I know exactly what's going to happen. So those two companies quickly moved into Mexico, and they missed the mark so much in the amount of money, the amount of time it took to get up. Both those companies later filed bankruptcy. And then Mexico didn't last very long, kind of went into Central America, then it went to China. Now it's, they're always chasing, lower prices. So usually t-shirts aren't China now. It's probably going to be Bangladesh, India, those places like that. So, and I like to say is, at some point in time, where you going to go, you're going to run out of places for cheap labor. So you're going to go to the moon, go to Mars. I mean, the model is broken. And unfortunately, and now the scary thing with the apparel industry is not only 98% clothes made overseas, 30% of the clothes made never get sold. 30%.
Wow.
Yes. Shocking.
Huh.
So what do we do with that? In one of my presentations I do tomorrow, satellite image of a pile of clothes in a desert in Chile where the pile of clothes is bigger than the town it sits beside. We dump these things because we've not assigned, and all I say is, I know you're familiar with the whole fast fashion and Shein and Temu and all this stuff here. We're not going, I want a level playing field. That's all I ask for. Just let's put all our cards on the table, including price. But let's talk about your social environment. And back, Jessica, earlier, we were very fortunate, and I was doing a podcast last week on this, is that we had the values in place for triple bottom line. I've always had a care for the environment. I guess I grew up as a tree hugger, always been a tree hugger. And then
me too, for what it's worth.
There you go. But then we've always had a care for our employees. They're our most valuable asset. We call it living wage now, but we never pay minimum wage. We wanted to make sure people were happy with what they're doing and getting compensated. So we help them with their insurance. We make sure they're paid a living wage. And so we had those values in place pre-NAFTA, and we were able to compete because we're all in the same field of other competitors were in the U.S. So there was some, barriers to control or, to what they could do or not do. And then we were able to do these other things of paying our employees better, doing things to improve our impact on the environment by really focusing on the efficiency of our operation. But we were competing in the U.S. market. And so, but soon as it went global and you got, subsidized labor and this stuff coming in from Temu, I mean, that stuff, not always it's cheap prices, and cheap quality, I should say, more than anything, but they're subsidized by their government. So, I mean, you can't compete with that. And that's all I say is I just want a level playing field. And right now that's level playing field very tough.
Curious about that opportunity because, problems create opportunities, right? And one startup I've heard of recently, Megapaca, and there's also, that's in South America, but ThreadUp in the United States is kind of addressing going from fast fashion to trying to upcycle clothing, which just, trying to have a durable secondary market instead of the waste. And you described, basically reasserting values that you already had after NAFTA as a differentiator. But what led you to believe, Eric, that there was the opportunity there that, if we emphasize that we have a triple bottom line, that people are going to value that and that we're going to be able to get consumers? What was your approach for finding that opportunity?
Well, I think we're still looking for that opportunity. We like to say our best customer is educated customer. And we're constantly fighting against, the greenwashing on one end, the low prices on the other end. So for us, it was a couple of things. First of all, we realized that we're never going to grow the cotton, gin the cotton, spin the cotton, knit the cotton. So, God, this goes back again 15 plus years ago. We started buying cotton from this farmer here, which is probably about 60 miles from here. And I'll never forget when I went down to see Ronnie, now working with his son, Andrew. And I went to Ronnie and said, I want to buy some of your cotton. And Ronnie looked at me, why in the heck does this little bitty company in Burlington, North Carolina want to buy my cotton? You get all the T-shirts in the world. At that time, it was a 1-800 number. Now it's the internet. And I told Ronnie, I says, I need to understand and control the supply chain. And because, again, and this was something that came out of a congressional hearing I participated in last fall. And one of the senators says, what can we do? Or one of the senator's staff, he said, what can we do in regards to fast fashion? I said, to me, it's pretty simple. I says, you already require carrying content on your clothes. That's a law. And where we got off track and we never changed is we just have this, what they call country of origin, which really just means the last place it was. So you'll get back to a T-shirt. It could say made in Vietnam. It could be North Carolina cotton. It might not be. So we know the brands they know their supply chain. They do that very well, the global supply chain. So what we did over 15 years ago is we made that supply chain transparent. First of all, we did it with contrasting color in the sleeve and the hem. And then during COVID, everybody got used to QR codes. Now it's a QR code. Scan that QR code, and you get to see the person that tractor there. Well, that's actually Ronnie, but you would be connected to Andrew. Phone number, physical address, email, and photograph. The whole supply chain, the farmer, the ginner, the spinner, the knitter, the finisher, the cut and sew. All these are companies that are not owned or part of TS Designs. We use their services. So what we do, we buy the cotton from that farmer there. And then we have a person on our team that manages it, comes all the way through to the shirt comes to TS Designs. We're very fortunate because we're in North Carolina. We can do that all in what we call dirt to shirt. 700 miles, transparent supply chain, where typical T-shirts is 20,000 miles. And again, I don't harp as much on the 20. I harp on, and I've had multiple brands. Our door's open. Please come visit us. And I've had Gap. I know a couple of years Gap was in here. I didn't know they were coming on a tour, and they talked about they were showing off their beautiful sustainability report. I mean, my gosh, I just like to have the income that they did for the photographs in it. But anyway, I said, that's great. Thank you for doing that. Why don't you just make your supply chain transparent? You as a consumer are making investments in these brands. They should at least let you know where these things are made. Now, chance of you going to Vietnam, all those places, about zero. But, we got this thing called the internet. They give you the information. You can send them an email. You can go to the website. Crickets. And all you get is this garbage BS about, we use fair trade labor, or we do this or whatever. Until you give me the keys to your supply chain, I call bullshit. And that's why we have the problems we got today is that the lack of transparency. It doesn't come out until somebody does a deep dive and find out, that organic cotton ended up with Uyghurs in China and slave labor produced it. Oh, I'm sorry. We shouldn't have. I mean, the whole thing of Rana Plaza, God, what are we up to? I think it's 10 years ago. Are you familiar with the event that happened in Rana Plaza, which is in Pakistan?
Was that one of the sweatshops collapsing? And
an 8-story building that should never been built.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Collapsed, killed over 1,000 people. And you know what? No brands, nobody went to jail. And again, the way they do it, that's our agent. No, we know why you were in Bangladesh. Because at that time, it has the cheapest labor to produce this. So, yeah, technically, you can hide between things, but we know why you were there. The blood is on your hands. But again, at the end of the day, I like to say, in the day's time with the, I can't do the right word, lack of our federal government to put in legitimate rules and regulations, the responsibility falls back to the consumer. So we constantly do our part and just try to get people just be aware. And again, it's not a perfect world, but just be aware. And I was talking to a group of students the other night. Every day you have a choice: the food you eat, energy you use, clothes you wear. Think about those choices. Sometimes you don't have a choice, but a lot of times you do. So think about that choice, and I think in long term you end up in a much better place.
So in terms of doing that education, which I agree sounds like a really important component to getting people to understand why it's so important to select what they eat, what they wear, all the things. What are some ways that you guys have found that are effective doing that? Like, what's the go-to, like what works? What's getting to people?
Well, and that's a good question, Jessica, because I tell when these folks come in and do a lot of tours and stuff like that, is I ask them, back in the 80s and the 90s, there was only one way to advertise. What do you think that was? This question for you.
Oh, it's a question.
One sort, this is pre-internet, so what would have been the way to advertise?
I mean, I would like either print, like in a magazine or TV commercial.
Yellow pages.
Or the yellow pages.
Which, believe it or not, they still exist. I don't know who looks at them, but anyway, I never forget. We would have a meeting once a year with the yellow page salesman, and literally we spend the afternoon because we'd have to be in the yellow pages in every town across North Carolina. That would be the only way people would find us out. If we weren't in the yellow pages, I mean, it didn't make sense to be in the newspaper. It didn't make sense being ready. So you bought, ads from Asheville to Wilmington. So we spent thousands and thousands of dollars. And then you're deciding, was it going to be a 2 colors? We one color. I mean, they had a lock on that thing. And you fast forward to today, oh my gosh, there's so many channels of communication and change so quickly. Facebook was hot. Now only old folks do Facebook, and Instagram's going to TikTok. And, the only thing my staff lets me do is I have my own personal LinkedIn page. But they're doing newsletters. They're doing, obviously web pages. We've got a TV interview with some of my staff later. I mean, unfortunately, there's no silver bullet solution. You do this to go here, and then you come to find out, you got certain customers that live on certain platforms. And if you want to connect with them, you better be on that platform. It might be email. It might be Facebook messaging. It might be, which we call Twitter now. I mean, it's just, and you can't do them all. We're constantly going through that. Where should we be and where should we be spending our time? And that's a challenge, for a small business. And again, you got a super small, budget that you can put towards that. And you got Google ads, you got Facebook ads. And so now at least we've got data that measures that, and we're constantly looking at that. So it's evolving, it's fast changing. And the other thing I like to say about, from my perspective in business in general, first of all, if you're not evolving and changing, you might as well be going out of business. I don't care how good your business is. Things change. And it used to be, I forgot the rule was, a certain percentage of your customers won't be your customers in a certain amount of years. I can tell you that rate is rapidly changing to the point we have very little ability to forecast. We have and we offer tons of different services, that we do color matching, we do contract garment dyeing, we do full package, we do fulfillment on the web. So, our job is to identify the customer and then wrap our services around that customer need. Back to pre-NAFTA, literally we made, 90 a majority of our money was just putting a print on a T-shirt. I mean, go back to Nike. Literally, they would give us POs 6 months out. And so you could just plan your business. This is what we need to do the next 6 months. Very, very easy. Fast forward to today, with the ability to not be able to forecast, what we've done is we've cross-trained. And so our people ebb and flow daily, depending on, where the bottlenecks are. It could be in art, it could be in screens, it could be in print, it could be in packaging, it could be garment dyeing. So that's the thing that's kept us viable, is diversifying our services, and then having a great staff that's very fluid to get it done.
For the listener that we have today, what advice would you give them on selecting a good partner? What type of traits to look for, where you've had success, or, building a team? I think these are lessons that can go across a lot of different spaces.
I think the most valuable thing, looking back at my 44 years and moving forward, it's the relationships and the contacts I have. Because the world is getting more complicated, and that person that says they got the answer is the person I'm going to run from, because it's just, there's no silver bullet solutions to anything. So and again, relationships are two-way streets. Sometimes I'm asking, sometimes I'm giving. But just a perfect example. I was on the Zoom right prior to this, was a fraternity brother of mine at UNC, son. He went on to get his doctorate and PhD, and now he's doing research into plastic recycling and the single-use plastic recycling, which is just a made-up fallacy anyway. But he's leading this drive at some university. And anyway, he was on CBS Morning News yesterday. And so because, I met him years ago, he stayed in my house. I went to Elon University. I called him back up, and, we haven't talked in years. And now this guy's just this massive resource and got this data about plastic recycling. And so you just never know when you go, as they say, you cross back over that bridge, never burn it. And that's tough sometimes, because some relationships don't work out. But just try your best to always leave a relationship on a good note. We agree to disagree and walk away. But those relationships, the lucky thing that I have with Tom, my retired business partner, and this was a lot of things in life are just luck, and this was luck. I got connected with Tom through introduction. It just happened to be his strengths and abilities were different from mine. He was the detail guy. He was the builder. He did the finance. I was the big picture guy who did the sales and marketing. So, business is like a marriage. We're in business for over 35 years, longer than I was married. So 30 years, long time. But, it worked because we respected each other. We didn't always agree, but we knew the lanes we were in. When it came to design and build, he would run ideas by me. But at the end of the day, I would give him input, but I let him do his thing. And the same thing, I would give him ideas on what we're doing in sales and marketing, and we'd have discussion, but he would, he'd let me stay in that lane. So it was interesting. The office that we're at here, having the Zoom call, this was our fourth location. Our first location, which was a 2,000 square foot building, only had one office. So we shared the office. And that idea worked all the way to this one. So when we built this building, this is a long rectangular office. So he was in this corner and I was in this corner. I think we practiced through osmosis. But just being, he saw my conversation. I heard his conversation. And then when he retired, matter of fact, we named this the Signage Conference Room, and I moved to a smaller office behind here. But I can't, it's more important than ever. We have, our staff is only 12 folks. But we have 6 regular consultants, and we're constantly bringing people in and out on a short-term consulting. Because again, it just, we need information that we can't justify, to hire, the whole idea of hiring somebody full time, working 9 to 5. And that's the other thing that's been very interesting too, as we, onboard younger folks, is understanding their perspective. Yes, I might have some experience, but they have a different perspective. And one thing I've learned working around younger folks is I was a generation that, you're going to work 80 hours a week. You're going to if they want you to go to Siberia, you go to Siberia. It's all about the job. You just, there was no work-life balance. It was just work. And now I found working with younger people, I appreciate, understand the work-life balance. And so giving people the opportunity to have flexibility, we were an early adopter to the 4 10-hour days. God, we haven't been working Fridays for, my gosh, it was way before COVID, because that was a way I said, wait a minute, we can still get the same amount of work done. They get a 3-day work week. It's less ups, it's less downs in a manufacturing, which is good. And then during COVID, we had some of our staff that could work remotely. So we got, that environment set up for them. So we're constantly, what do we do to make this a good job for you while you have a life outside, but trying to maintain that balance. So it's really shifted. But again, back in I think in the day is the relationships that I've built and I respect and that I appreciate. And then when they reach out to me, try to help them. I mean, these 2 young guys that are starting this podcast locally, I mean, they're new guys. I knew their parents and I want to help them. So, it's a chance to, give back. And I think when you give back, I think in time that pays back. And we got to get, the challenge too with the whole global marketplace, it's so transactional, because all it is I'm sending a PO to somebody halfway around the world that can do a service or a product for X price. There's never a relationship built. And the challenge that you have with that, if I have only a relationship with you based on a PO and price, and then somebody walks through the door and says, I can give you that product and price, I mean, I'll just go save the money. But when you have a relationship with the farmer here, the family, where they live, you've been to their house, their kids. When that times get tough, it makes it easier to have those discussions because we have a relationship built beyond price. And our whole supply chain is built upon relationships because things don't always go smooth. Some things get screwed up. And it's just a lot easier to have that conversation when you know that person other than the phone more than is a name and a number on a PO.
Yeah, I think that's really amazing advice and it's huge. It's like you said, the just not burning bridges. And I mean, even in my experience in working, it's just the world is a lot smaller than you realize, I think, when you're young and
Yes.
you realize people come back around, and it's so important to kind of maintain that integrity as you go.
Man, that was so cool. The guy that was just was Zooming with us now, the sign inside this posse where literally he stayed at my house when he was an undergraduate at Elon because I forgot what it was. He needed to come up here for just a couple weeks. And I said, sure, he can just stay at our house. Mm-hmm. And he stayed at our house a couple weeks. And fast forward 20 or 30 years later, he's this respected scientist that just delivered this report. And now he's on CBS News. But it made it easy for me to send him an email and have a conversation with him because, I think he appreciated me helping him, years ago. And now I'm coming back and says, this supports what we're doing, the work that you're doing. So how can we work? So it's interesting too, these people that I knew growing up, as kids and teenager. And now, I'm going to them for help and support. So the relationships have changed, but I think the main thing is always respect people where they are and what they're doing. And I think the other thing too, what you're going back to saying, Jessica, is, there's just, don't get so, as a business, yes, business, you got to save money. That affects profits, but just don't go at it at saving money. Look at the impact it's either going to have environmentally, it's going to have socially, or it's, your people. North Carolina, embarrassing to say, I said yesterday, our minimum wage legally is still $7.25.
Wow.
That is beyond embarrassing. And everybody says, oh, well, the marketplace, there are shitty people out there that will take advantage of that, people that are less educated, and pay them $7.25. And how do we think that's, again, that's why we need the balance between government and business. Government doesn't have all the answers. Business doesn't have all the answers. But damn it, $7.25 doesn't work in any calculation in anybody's life in these times. But here we are in the state. And again, you've got, the other extreme, was it LA or California did the $20 minimum for fast food workers or something like that?
Yeah. I think California, which is like...
at the end of the day, I like to say a community cannot be successful unless everyone in that community has an opportunity to participate. If you're paying $7.25 to somebody an hour to work, they ain't participating in your community. They are struggling to survive. And so it's just the hypocrisy of, and that's the whole thing of that I get caught up on too, is that, I'm in this, yes, I need to make some income, and sometimes I don't, whatever, but I'm not in it just for the money. And then you see the people that are quite successful, the Elon Musk, the Jeff Bezos. But at some point, what's another $1 billion, in your lifestyle when you can do other things? Jeff needs a bigger sailboat. Why don't you do something more impactful with your money instead of enriching your lifestyle? And again, I just think for some reason it gets, and again, I'm worried about what's happening in athletics, what's happening in entertainment. It gets just so out of balance. And again, if you're the only one making money and the people around you are struggling, eventually it's going to impact you. We've got to balance the scale. I'm a big capitalist. I'm big in the marketplace, but I don't want to limit choice. But I do think there is a cost associated with choice at some point. If you want to go drive a humongous vehicle that gets 10 miles to the gallon, that's fine. You got the money. But there's an additional cost to the environment for you driving that vehicle that you need to be responsible for. And so there needs to be some additional charge. I mean, people freak out about this stuff, but there's just a certain amount of resources that we have. And if you're in a position to buy more of those resources, that's good. But there's also consequences with the consumption of those resources you're taking away that other people can't have. I go, sorry to go political on you on that stuff.
Yeah.
I get a little emotional and passionate about that stuff. Back to a level playing field, and everybody has an opportunity. And again, the cost of healthcare. Vanderbilt University, I don't know if you heard this yesterday. They're the first university, 1 year tuition, $100,000. Try to make those numbers work. I mean, yeah. And again, the interesting thing we've done this time I've been in business, cost of education, the cost of healthcare, the cost of housing. Again, some people can write the check. Good for them. But there's getting less and less people that can't write the check and end up getting, burdened with this cost, of education and healthcare and all that. So, but sorry to get off subject. Get me back on track. What we'll talk about.
This might be slightly off topic or not, but you mentioned I wouldn't say, you didn't finish college, which I think is actually a relatively common thread for entrepreneurs. So I think that's an interesting thing. And I'm curious right now, your opinion on college, because I have 3 kids about to start going off to college. And I just wonder sometimes, especially related to just the current marketplace of opportunities and how it's just such a different world now. What is, in your opinion, the value of college, I guess, right now for people, and in relation to being an entrepreneur specifically, I guess?
Well, college has its purpose.
Mm-hmm.
We need our doctors, we need our lawyers. But there's, I think, Europe seems to do a better job with developing alternative pathways for skills, I mean, my life would suck without a plumber, without an electrician, without a mechanic. I'm depending on those people, and we need the farmer. I mean, there's other pathways that we need to respect and then compensate for the work, because again, back to the farmer, we need access to good food. We don't need to try to buy cheaper food. So part of it's an education, and part of it's just and again, I was the generation, my mom didn't go to college. My dad was the first one in his family to go to college. So it's interesting, looking back and knowing my grandparents on both sides, success was going to college and buying a house and having a car. And again, you check those boxes, you're good to go. Well, I think we perverted that now. So it's, how big is your house? How many cars do you have? And again, we've also found that stuff doesn't always bring, happiness either. It just brings more, as my wife and I get older, we want less stuff. We want a smaller house. We want less stuff to worry about. I don't want to acquire a lot of things. It's just stuff to worry about and break. So I think there's a breaking point for college, because back to the Vanderbilt, I can't think of, first of all, undergrads, there's 400,000. So there's probably not too many degrees that are going to pay back up $400,000 college debt. So you got to go on to some graduate degree. And then you keep raising the bar higher and higher you reduce the window of jobs that you can get that pays back off that debt. So you get kind of funneled down to some profession because you got this high amount of debt to pay, unless you're some rich kid and they can stroke the check. Good for them. But I think we back simple as we overemphasize the college education, and I think there should be, and there are alternate pathways. At the end of the day, I think be happy what you're doing, and you'll be successful what you're doing. But just forcing yourself to go to college to get that degree is not right for everybody. But unfortunately, we live in a time where it's looked down upon if you don't go to college. Unfortunately, I'm sad to say. But I mean, back to God, what do I pay my plumber? Oh my gosh, I think he's $75 an hour, something like that, $100 an hour. But man, I want my plumber, and I'll easily pay it. And he does quite well. Probably does a lot better than I do. So I think again, find what your kids are happy at and support them. But it's not always going to a 4-year college, which turns into being a 5-year college, and then they go to another degree, ends up being 7 years. So.
And to your point, it's not the guarantee of you'll definitely get a job if you at least go to college, and you'll get the kind of job you think you're going to get. It's not really that world anymore.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
No. So, and it's interesting going back and I lost my dad a few years ago, but he actually worked for Burlington Industry. That's how I got to Burlington. But it's interesting, that generation, you went to college. You got a job out of college, and you probably work for that company the rest of your life. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's very little turnover. And then, my generation kind of started that. But now, I mean, turnover is just a daily thing. It's people have, I forget what the percent, but they have a lot more jobs in their career or life of working than they did a generation ago. So there's no guarantees like there used to be, that pathway, get out of college, get a job, get a pension, get a retirement, get your health care, do it for 30 years and retire and all that. That does not exist anymore. Yeah. In general.
Yeah. I remember seeing the tail end of it too, because our grandfather was a doctor, and he had a pension like the rest of his life, and just my kids wouldn't even compute that right now. Like they wouldn't understand how that's even possible.
Eric, I'll change the subject a bit too. I saw on your LinkedIn here that you started a beer co-op recently, and I was curious about that. What inspired the beer co-op? How's it going? Any interesting lessons that you learned in doing that?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I've had lots of ventures, lots of failure, lots of successes. That particular one, Burlington Beer Works, spun out of a venture that did fail, which is called Company Shops. It was a cooperative grocery store that I helped start. And again, the thing I keep going back to is a community can't be successful unless anyone has an opportunity. So I'm all about creating businesses that the community owns, i.e. co-op. So we started this co-op grocery store in downtown Burlington. Mistakes made, lessons learned, but it failed. Unfortunately, wish I could do that one over. One day I might do that, Chad. Maybe talks another day. I like to have another shot at it because I'm big about the nice thing about that model. It's a way to get local food to your community because, we're surrounded by the big box grocery stores and, they don't, they don't have a system that connect with the small local farms. They got to have that big distribution. So anyway, that led to Burlington Beer Works, which we just celebrated our 5th anniversary. And at the time that we opened, we were the 10th cooperative brewer in the country, the first in North Carolina. The way that works in the North Carolina law is essentially is a glorified LLC. And so people could buy a share of stock for $100 if you're a North Carolina resident. Then the way it works, then that one share would allow you to also buy preferred non-voting stock, i.e. you could make a further investment into it. But we made sure that if you made that further investment, you still only got one vote. So we made sure the typical model, the more money you get in it, the more shares you get, the more shares you get, the more votes you get. And we know how that can get skewed because you've got a very narrow focus. So now we've got about 3,000 owners. I helped found this with 2 other guys, and I forget, I'm like share number 3 or something like that. My wife and I made a further investment, but if somebody bought a share of stock today, they would have the same rights and privileges I got that started it. And the whole purpose of that is, again, I know nothing about beer. I know nothing about food. I learned from Company Shops. You hire the right people. And the way it's structured is I'm on the board and Tracy, as our general manager, is also on the board. So our job is a responsibility to the owners, 3,000 owners. And Tracy's job is the day-to-day responsibility of running that operation that, and she reports back to the board. So we don't get involved in the day-to-day. We don't get in job. We look at the finances and we look at the margins and the cost, but how she runs that is totally up to Tracy. And she knows that. We have this firewall. So we're closed on Monday, but I'll go in there tomorrow. Well, matter of fact, I have a lunch meeting there tomorrow. And, I can't say, Jessica's doing a crappy job. You need to talk to her. You need to fire her. No, I can give suggestions or make things, but I have no control of the day-to-day operations. I tell people the reason I like to do it is it gives me, matter of fact, I've got somebody from Senator Tillis's office coming tomorrow. So I know I've got a place I can get a reservation, and I know I'm going to have good food and I'll have good service. So I did it for my selfish benefit, is to have this place in our community that's go-to for good food and good beer. But I like the model is, it will always be here. It's, if it was, I helped start this brewery. The old model was I helped start, it's my brewery. I'm going to call the shots. And that's okay. Let's move this thing to Charlotte. We won't go to Charlotte. We got 3,000 owners. You got to convince those 3,000 owners, or majority of them, you want to move to Charlotte, which probably is not going to happen. So I'm very like those cooperatively owned models. We keep playing around with different things for, what's the future of TS Designs to keep it going. We're looking at a nonprofit structure. We're looking at a co-op structure, but something to keep, because obviously you can't live forever. So, I'm very interested in how we keep the momentum forward, what we're doing here, And I get offers, people want to buy the business, buy the building, but I'm sure the offers are strictly, bottom line, what can we suck out of this business, to make profits. And that's just, hopefully I will be able to be in a point and we'll do that to make a decision. That transition will happen to be able to keep the momentum that we're doing now forward. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's been, anytime you come to Burlington, Jessica, it's a little bit road trip for you, but you have an open invitation for a good meal and a good beer at Burlington Beer Works.
I love a good meal and a good beer. That sounds delicious.
Yep. And you get to see my back. I live on a farm. I'm only 15 acres. My backdoor neighbor does grass-fed beef.
Oh, cool.
He's got now 800 acres. And so he's the hamburger we serve there since day one. It comes from him. So, very local focus. So that's why I help on the back end.
That's
connect
cool.
Farmers, bring it in. But again, it's ultimately Tracy that drives what the menu is going to look like. Mm-hmm. Of course, hamburgers are on it for beer. But, she's the one that, does all the negotiation, the prices. I just do the introductions.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. It's like you said before, it's the staying in your lane or knowing your lane.
Exactly.
And just putting people in their best spot to do their best work.
Exactly.
As we close out, we just really want to say thank you so much for being on the show. Eric, Henry, TS Designs, and Eric, is there anything else you want to mention? Anything that you got working on now you want to shout out, or a message you'd like to leave the listeners with?
Oh, God, I'm sure I'm forgetting something. But again, I thank you for the opportunity. I'm always interested in just connecting with people to learn new things and, how to make a better world. So I guess on your podcast, you'll share with, I'm very active on LinkedIn. You can find the TS Designs website. We started during COVID, a retail brand called Solid State Clothing. Very excited about that because what we're doing, really focusing on natural fibers and natural dyes. Solid State Clothing, TS Designs. I'm on LinkedIn. Again, thank you for what you're doing, and sharing information is important. There's not one person who has the answer. The answer lies in the community, so I'm glad to be in yours.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been really interesting and great to hear your wisdom and your stories.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Thanks for reaching out.